I don't, can't see how bald I really am. And my barber was out Saturday, so I'm in desperate need of a haircut.
Okay, we are ready to go.
Ready to go. Great. Welcome to the April 8th, 2024 meeting of the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee. My name is Steve Perez and I am the Vice Chair of the committee. Tonight we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. This meeting is called to order at 6:35 p.m. As a reminder, New York state law requires all community board members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. And thank you, B. Disman has volunteered for taking minutes for tonight's meeting. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Okay, committee members, I will call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Jim Collins.
Here.
B. Disman.
Here.
Nad Kalani. Ava Marie Lassiter.
Present.
David Lowenstein is not with us tonight. Steve O. Also not with us. Reshma Patel.
Present.
Steve Perez.
Present.
Roberto Ruiz Melendez.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Terrific. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. I believe Reshma wanted to amend the second item of the agenda. Do you want to offer that amendment now?
In terms, we had on this agenda a discussion of voter guide mailings in New York City, which was an issue that you had brought up, Jim, last year. And I was just gonna add to it. I thought that we should have a broader discussion on what other voting reforms we might want to see. It's something that this committee has talked about in past, and some of the suggestions that we had put in a resolution did get passed in 2020, 2021, and again in 2022. So.
Great, so I would move to amend the agenda to broaden the discussion around election.
To make it a broader discussion on what new additional voting reforms we would like to see. There is legislation in the state Senate that has not gone through the state assembly, and we could take a look at that.
Terrific, so we will, are there any objections to adopting that amendment? If seeing none, we will adopt the agenda as amended. The minutes from the March 11th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand. See no objections. The minutes from the March 11th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CV6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so you can speak. Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so you can speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties that you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud in the record during the meeting. Great, so if we can turn to the first item of discussion on the agenda, which is discussion of the New York State open meetings law. So I'm not quite sure that there's a lot to discuss about this topic, but I wanted to just review what we have said in the past as a committee about this, and that is, and at the December full board meeting, we passed a resolution which was drafted in this committee supporting the open meeting law, and the one that's being put forward by Assemblyman Boers to allow committees like ours, public bodies, to conduct Zoom meetings, virtual meetings, if they would like to. So that my understanding is that is still pending, and that there are several other laws. But yes,
has he gotten a co-sponsor in the Senate yet?
I think Jesus was saying yes. We do have a Senate bill that is similar to that bill.
Who's the co-sponsor? Do we know offhand?
It's not one of our electeds.
Okay.
Remind me again, Brendan, who is the elected of the Senate version?
I'm busy pulling it up. I need to.
Well, no worries. I can find it later.
Yeah,
But it might behoove the community boards citywide to maybe.
Senator Fernandez.
Okay.
Natalia
Fernandez, 34th Senate District.
It might be who, I mean, there's 6, what are there? How many community boards are there? 50, 59, and each of them has 50 odd members, right?
Ideally.
64 or something like that. I forget the exact.
Yeah, I think
That's a lot of people. I mean, it might behoove us and at least a borough board to solicit the assemblyman and the senator to go about moving on this.
So, I mean,
Because otherwise the bills die.
yeah, so given where we
Till the
are
next pandemic.
where we are in the state cycle, right? We're kind of at the end, and it hasn't
Exactly.
made movement this year. But I'm glad to see that the Senate, we got the Senate as co-sponsor. I think this has been brought up at Borough Board, right? This is because Kyle had brought it up at Borough Board and kind of take the lead with the Manhattan, the 12, so the 11 other Manhattan boards are on top of it. I don't think we've ever reached out to the other boroughs, because we had and I think September 2021, we had done the initial resolution to wanna have access to hybrid and Zoom meetings.
But it might be nice perhaps if the borough president issued instructions for board members. There are a lot of us. I mean, 500, 600 in New York, in Manhattan alone, or supposedly, to put some pressure on these elected officials and maybe the speaker and the majority leader.
Yeah, and our own
Wouldn't hurt.
elected leaders, which we've already sent our resolution to, but that maybe we.
Yeah, but I'm saying that me
Yeah.
as an individual
Sure,
should
yeah.
send a note to
Oh, I
the
see, so you're not
speaker.
saying us as a committee, you're saying each
Each
individual
individual
board member.
board member, right?
Yeah.
The impression that I had was that it was still pending and they were pushing it forward and they were trying to get it done. And right now they're focused on getting the budget finished.
Oh, yeah. of
So
course.
like that's
Yeah.
kind of the priority, and
Right.
then they'll kind of deal
Right.
with some of these other
Right.
issues. So hopefully,
But things have a tendency to die once the initial push comes in.
great. Does anybody have anything else to add?
I would say B's hand is raised.
B, please go ahead.
So I thought Assembly Barris said at the full board meeting that while he was supporting this and hoping it passed, I didn't think he thought it would pass in, this particular term because of the budget and everything. Am I wrong in my impression?
That is what he said. I mean, he might know better than we do since he's right in the thick of it. But without a crystal ball, that may be hard to say.
Yeah. And the second thing, Jesus, remind me, when we were pushing this issue, I think last year, not all community boards are of the same mind as we are. Am I correct?
Yes, that seems to still be the case.
And there are
Okay,
some, oh, sorry. I
No,
didn't
thank you.
Mhm. Yeah,
Go ahead.
I don't remember our resolution. I think our resolution left it to the option of the individual community boards, which I think is appropriate.
Yes, our resolution called for our committee chair, or sorry, our board chair to bring it up with all of the other Manhattan boards as well as the Manhattan Borough President's office and for them to raise it as far as they could.
Right, pursue it as they like.
And I've heard from people who are on other community boards that their boards where committees are just meeting on Zoom still.
Yeah.
And then there's some community boards, not in this borough, in other boroughs, where people just haven't been meeting. I've heard of this,
Since the
because,
pandemic?
yeah, because, or like for months because of this issue. And even in our own case, we had our Parks Committee meeting last week got canceled because our chair was sick. This week, we have the chair of this committee is sick. If we, there's still many reasons. We had crazy weather during full board last week, like reasons if we could have all Zoom, I think it would be more accessible to people.
For sure.
It also helps in terms of recruiting board members,
Yeah.
because a lot of, you tend to get a much more diverse group of people if
Yeah.
you can do it from your computer versus having to truck here,
Yeah.
particularly parents with young children, people who have to take
Yeah.
care of our elderly relatives, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's something we should
Yeah,
continue to pursue
So I think-
aggressively.
to your point, Jim, I don't know how we reach out. We can talk to our borough president.
Mhm.
If, if people want to get individual board members, but the opinions would be like diverse. I think another angle we could take is talk to organizations that are good government organizations.
Mhm.
That are pushing for more access for people, more diversity in our elected body. We should say community boards is somewhat like the lowest level of government, and to have that kind of added diversity at our community board level, we need to have this.
Agreed.
Yeah.
One thing that would really help is if our council members passed a resolution advocating for the position that we're advocating for. But I don't have a legislative background in the council, so I don't know what the turnaround time for something like that would be. But if they could pull something like that off and send it to the state legislature and say, look, this New York City Council is in favor of giving community boards more flexibility with meeting online, that could only help push it along. The committee was also sent a report that was issued by the Committee on Open Government. Part of the law 2 years ago, when these being able to meet on Zoom and stuff was was codified into the law, at least temporarily. One of the requirements was that after 2 years' time, a report would have to be issued. And that report came out several months ago, actually. We initially missed it because it was tucked away inside another report that was issued by the Committee on Open Government. But it's a 3-page document, and it essentially says that people like meeting online. There are some cons, the biggest of which is that if your internet goes down or if your feed goes down or something like that, then people are left not being able to access the meeting, and that is a violation of state law. But beyond that, there were some other cons that were mentioned that are not something this board has any problems with. But by and large, the feedback that the Committee on Open Government got on not meeting online all these years is that people really like it, but that more work needs to be done to make sure that people do it to the level that they're really supposed to be doing it. And they do sort of make the determination that it is possible to, as they say, preserve transparency and greater access while also having more flexibility in meeting online. They don't go so far as to say all Zoom all the time, but they do go so far as to say that there are very good reasons for why community boards or public bodies should be allowed to meet on Zoom more. It might be good to send this report to our
Yeah, would you?
electeds. They may have missed it. And this might be something they can use to,
Could you send it to me as well, Jesus? Can you
yes,
send
we sent it to the entire committee, but we'll resend it.
Did you?
Yes, we'll resend it.
I didn't see it.
It was sent when we wrote the resolution that Alex, in support of Alex Flores' bill, so it's like sometime October, I think we probably got it in the email.
Oh, back.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
No, this report.
No,
we sent it-
you said it was recent.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was
recent,
recent.
different?
The report came out, back in December,
Yeah.
but we noticed it, and since we saw this was going to be on the agenda, we sent it to you guys a week or two ago.
Oh, I didn't say.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, we
Recent.
can,
Recent.
Also, this report
I'll have
was,
to check my phone, but it's charging.
just be warned when it's sent, that, the report's tucked away on like page 14 of
Okay.
this
Okay.
document, so. Yeah, it's a bit hidden.
So then, should we be sending the, I think that discussion item process, do we just send them the chair of this committee, send an email to our elected officials with the report, or do we wanna write some kind of resolution to our, because the resolution we had approved at the full board in December was a resolution to our state elected,
Right.
not to our city elected.
Right.
And do we want to write a resolution to our city electeds, for this matter?
If you wanna move, I'll second it.
Okay, so.
Will the timing of that work with this? That's what I.
So the timing, again, we should talk to, and I'm happy to reach out to Alex Force's office to, or, if you want to do, you can do it, and ask him about this, but just knowing the way Albany works and how this has gotten very little traction, I actually don't think whether our resolution is now or in a month, it's gonna be on the calendar cycle by the time they get done.
So this is for a future.
This
it's
is,
just
I'm
future
thinking this is a
advocacy.
next year thing, but if the
Next
city council, is able to pass something, then it gets on the radar for Albany as they get into the next calendar year.
Mhm.
One thing that should be noted is that if these laws expire, we go back to the regime that we had before the pandemic. That means
No,
the only people get to be on Zoom are the public,
Yeah,
or a member can be on Zoom only if they allow their location to be a public location. So for example, B, for her to count for quorum, if these laws expire, we would have to list her wherever she happens to be as a location where other people can join from the public.
put the coffee and the donuts on me.
So I don't know whether they're going to just let it expire and let everyone go back to the way it was. It seems a little hard to believe that they would, since people have gotten so used to this, but the being on Zoom, extraordinary circumstances, disabilities, all that stuff was not there before the pandemic, and if it expires, it will go away.
Do you recollect the date, the expiration date Offhand?
July 1st
of this year?
of
Yeah.
this year.
Couple of Albany.
Well, they told us that 2 years ago. We've had technically, the
Yeah.
legislature has had 2 years to do
Yeah.
something about this.
Yeah,
yeah, and it just hasn't been a priority, but.
Seems like B. Disman requests the floor.
B, please.
So given what we just heard, don't we think between now and the next full board meeting, we could come up with a resolution or modify this resolution? So we could at least get started with our council people? Because if I remember correctly, our council people were very helpful before when we were going through this during the transition. So I don't think we should really wait further than the next full board meeting. And maybe we could just amend our resolution. I don't know if we've ever done that before.
Yeah.
you could take the boilerplate and
Yeah, it's
just
easy
make a
enough
couple of
to, yeah,
changes.
it's easy enough to do it. I'm happy to write this resolution. I
Yeah.
just I'll make an official motion to write a
Mhm.
resolution to our city elected.
Second,
And we can get it done by full board, full board, it's gonna be the May meeting, obviously, because we had April already.
And it would be asking them to pass a resolution supporting
mhm,
CV6.
Yes, yeah,
until this,
yeah.
Yeah,
Tell
and
them.
didn't we, I'm just gonna interrupt, didn't we do a lot of informal talking to the council people before? And shouldn't we do that now,
Mhm.
even before the resolution, to get a position?
I'm not sure, very, very informal. But given that it was largely a state issue, that's where we focused our efforts.
Is it worth asking the chair
Yes.
of the board to have those discussions with
Yes,
city council?
It's always worth a try.
Keith's the majority leader. I'm sure he's got plenty to
So it's
say.
something we can do in parallel while we're working on this.
Yeah, I think it's worth talking, like the last time I know we had discussions with Harvey and Kristen in addition to Alex Borges.
So I guess if there are no other
Is there objection to the
Yeah,
resolution as proposed?
Any objections? No, great. So
Okay, so yeah, I'll
Definitely.
circulate it and then we'll have it ready for May full board.
So was this passed by unanimous consent or
Or is there gonna be a roll call?
I think we should do a roll call vote just for the record.
Yes. So when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or not entitled. Jim Collins,
Support?
Pete Isman,
Support?
April Marie Lassiter,
Support.
Reshma Patel,
Support.
Steve Perez,
in favor.
Roberto Ruiz Melendez.
In favor.
Okay, with all 6 committee members present voting in favor, this resolution passes. And who will write it?
I will.
Rashomon.
Okay,
I think I still have the draft on my C drive somewhere.
Yeah, I probably have it in my email too, although if it's a PDF, then I'll ask you for the Word.
I don't use Word, I use
No, or whatever,
Yeah.
yeah, any kind of,
Google Docs.
yeah.
So if we can move on to the second agenda item, and that is the election.
Yeah, election reform,
Reform,
um,
and Rashma, I'll hand it to you to, take this topic.
Yeah. So I'll bring it back to Jim, the issue that you had brought up last year, after the primaries in June, is, that you were getting mailers for primaries, even though you were not going to be voting in a primary. Just to kind
Right.
of
I'm
clarify,
a Republican and
yeah,
we generally don't have primaries. We
and,
generally don't have candidates.
yeah, and, you know, and you're like, well, that's a waste of money, of
Mhm.
resources. And so when I had looked into that afterwards and, because we got into budget and stuff, but also there wasn't another election coming up for a while. But, so our voter rolls are maintained by the Board of Elections. The mailers that you were getting were from what's NYC Votes, which is a CFB, also has this whole voter outreach program. And the 2 databases don't automatically sync
Mhm.
and interact. So I thought that that's something that we should have those 2 databases connect, and perhaps something we should discuss advocating for.
Mhm.
Because I see your point. I mean, you know, I have no idea how much it costs, right, that aspect of it and how that would change, but, you know, at a time where we're saying, you know, there could be budget cuts and stuff, it's a little bit of money that perhaps could be saved, but more than that, I feel like we'll save paper at a time where we're seeing all kinds of impact of
Mhm.
environment.
So-
Well, do you want committee questions on
Well,
public?
yeah, I want to stick to the committee
Yeah.
before we move
Okay.
to the public.
Yeah.
Jim,
It's not just that, it's also, you know, a lot of people aren't politically savvy. They get something in their mail and they turn around and think, well, I have to act on this. And, you know, the few of us who are Republicans in the city, you know, we can get confused. I mean, particularly the elderly people. You know, and they think they have to go do something and they actually don't. It's just a hassle. But when you talk about the intermeshing, I think the other thing that we should advocate for is doing a full roll of the voter rolls, a full scan of them. So that we match them against the social security database to wipe out the people who are dead. And also wipe out the people who have moved, which we can do through the postal change of address database. And that would just clean up all of the voter rolls. You wouldn't have any of this nonsense happening. You know, these mistaken sets of mailings. that go to people, so. You know, somebody, I mean, particularly in a borough like Manhattan, where people move in and out so frequently, you know, students, young people who get, you know, end up getting married and move out to the suburbs or move to a bigger apartment, et cetera, et cetera. So I just think that's something that should be done. Not only should it be done now, but I would do it like at least at once every 3 to 5 years.
So from what I know, and this should be confirmed, but from what I know, from my involvement, I've been a poll worker before, and the roles get updated about every 5 years.
Mhm.
And they go through it in the Board of Elections
Mhm.
does that, and I do think they do that because there are times where people go to vote and then their name is not there, they
Mhm.
moved or whatever. But there is also legislation that the state Senate has passed, but the state assembly has not, to create a central database of voters in New York State, which does not exist right now.
Mhm.
And for this exact reason, when people move from county to county, that it's updated automatically. And then there is a national database, which
Mhm.
New York is not a part of right now, which
Mhm.
then would do the similar thing nationally.
Mhm.
And we can pull up
Mhm.
that legislation list of
Mhm.
proposed items
Mhm.
that the Senate has. There's about 10 bills in the state Senate right now. They have not moved in the state assembly, but
Mhm.
they're there. And the governor has also said that she was in favor.
Oh,
Talk about this list? right
Yes,
now?
yes.
Yeah. A friend is who works for
Yeah.
Board of Elections, tells me that the way that they determine whether or not somebody is still on the voter rolls or not is if they get return mail. So if somebody's taking their mail,
Yeah.
you've opened the door to potential voter fraud. So that's why I say it's probably better to run it against the Social Security database and the change of address database of the Postal Service. You know, do it just once every 3, 5 years, because leasing those databases
Yeah.
is expensive. It's, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to
So
do the match.
Brendan, I don't, can you pull up the list of legislation?
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
I
so
have this list pulled
Yeah.
up. Also, just wanted to flag that B has her hand raised.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say, I saw
Great.
B's hand.
B, you have the floor.
Yeah, so I was just gonna ask the question that Jim raised, because I used to work for the agency. I am not sure, Jim, you could match against the Social Security database. It's restricted for certain things. And there was a big discussion nationally of it. I've been retired for 2 years, so I don't know if it's changed. But there is a national database that you could match, just not going to the individual agencies.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the death database mostly.
It's the death, yeah, it's the death thing.
Yeah, the one they send to the banks to close up
Right, right.
your
So it's
safety
not,
deposit box.
it's not our normal database. It's because
Right.
once the person is deceased, you have no privacy rights. So
Right.
that is the database that we use.
Right, and that's the one that could be matched against, you know, against the voter rolls for dead.
Well, all
dead-
financial institutions use it. It's used in commerce and it's a
Exactly.
pretty effective database.
Exactly, and we could use it for the voter rolls, and we could use the postal service for the change of address. Cause people move out, I mean. You know, and they
Yeah.
shouldn't be voting, and certainly if they're moving to another jurisdiction, they shouldn't be voting there and still voting here, I mean, and that has happened a lot.
I would say it's very small. There's been all kinds of data on that, which I can share with you, but because the biggest problem is that people just don't vote. We don't have enough people
No,
voting. And, you know, I would just be happy if more
That's
people
another-
voted.
Period, yeah.
Yeah, period. So, people don't make, and sadly don't make that much effort to vote. But if you pull up, I don't see that, the database, one, but there's more legislation proposed. If you scroll, Brendan, maybe. I thought it was in this.
What bill number are you looking for?
And,
Is that a particular bill number you're looking for?
yeah, I can look on my
Well,
phone.
they've
the
been
text
busy,
number.
haven't they?
Well, can
Yeah.
you search for the word database and see the?
Yeah, and it's named after somebody who was a commissioner who passed away, the last name started with F, but I'm not.
There you go.
Dr. John L. Plateau?
Yeah, that's it. That's the legislation I was looking for.
What is
Would you
that?
like me to click on?
Click on the details.
657, that's this session, right?
Yes, this is from this session. Oh, no, well, it says, yeah, well, it goes, it's still, it hasn't passed. It was actually January 23rd, but it hasn't passed.
S 657, okay.
Yeah.
Take a look
And
at
see,
it
it's like
sometime.
50% progression because it hasn't moved in the space.
Mhm. Yeah, it needs to,
So Rashma, are you suggesting that we perhaps want to take a look at these bills and put together a resolution?
Yes, exactly, like we
Support.
want to support,
Okay.
and as I've said in the past, we have pushed for voting reforms, and there's this bill, which having this database, which would make it easier for people moving within the state, because I've seen the other option where people move, and then so often they'll be like, oh, I forgot to change my address, I couldn't vote, because
Right.
they show up at the,
Right.
poll site. So just to make it easier for
Yeah.
people, yeah.
I mean, we had, in my district, District 2.
Yeah,
We had a council member running unopposed. She got 10,000 votes. How do you get 10,000 votes if you're not even campaigning? I mean, just doesn't make logical sense. You know what I mean?
I don't, because if there's no one,
Why would anybody turn up to
no,
vote?
if there's no opposition, then there's no election, then there's no election held.
There was,
You're talking about last year?
yeah,
She had an opponent.
no, she didn't.
Yeah,
Not in
this-
the primary, I'm not talking primary, I'm talking the general election.
oh, okay, in the primary, Carlina.
Yeah, she had it,
Yeah.
right, but she had 10,000 votes turnout with no opponent.
Because you can vote in a general election,
I know you can,
right?
Yeah,
but why would you? You know what I'm
I
saying?
don't think we should question why someone votes.
yeah, I have to go look at that. There must have been other people on the ballot. That's why there was an election.
There were,
Yeah.
there were other, I
Yeah.
voted in that election.
Oh, you
There were-
voted.
District
you know.
2?
Yeah, there were multiple
Why?
people on there because you're exercising your right to vote. I mean,
There was nothing, I mean, somebody said that there might have been a judicial
Yeah,
challenge.
yeah, there were,
Was there a
there
judicial?
were judges to pick off the list.
Right, but were they opposed? Were there opponents?
I don't remember.
It just didn't make sense to me. I was surprised.
Yeah.
See 10,000 votes come out.
We can, I'm
So
gonna,
should we move this issue of just looking at all this and coming up with a resolution?
yes, and so
Maybe.
do people wanna look at some of the other proposals? Like one is automatic voter registration. So when you are, say you getting a license at the DMV or you're getting state provided healthcare, you're automatically registered to vote and you have to opt out.
What's
Which is, you have to opt out. If you don't wanna be registered to vote, you have to opt out, whereas right now you have to opt in. Like say
When
when you get a
when you
driver's
get
license,
your driver's license.
or if you're getting Medicaid, and Brendan has a point.
Yeah, just, with whatever the committee
Mhm.
wants to look at, it would be worth looking at the resolutions Airtable to see if the committee has already discussed and passed.
Yeah.
A resolution on that, like, and the reason I'm saying that is in the case of automatic voter registration, the community board did pass a resolution in February of 2019 supporting the passage of legislation enabling automatic voter registration in New York State. So, don't know if it would be worth the committee's time to revisit that when the
Yeah.
community board already spoke on that a few years ago.
Yeah.
So just want to flag that.
No,
Yeah,
thank you for.
there's a lot of things.
Were there any
Yeah.
other pieces of legislation, Rashma, that you thought?
No, those were the two that I thought, I mean, there's also something that says that you wanna give people adequate notification before they're taken off the voter rolls, which would go in hand with this
Mhm.
updating of the
Mhm.
voter rolls. And everyone's, we can share this with everybody if people wanna look at it and we can talk about it at the next meeting, because we don't have to, again, this isn't moving forward, I think, this.
Immediately.
Yeah, this cycle, so we have time.
Mhm.
So do we want to put this on the agenda for next?
Yeah, or if you wanna look at stuff, I mean, it's up to everyone else, right? Because I've looked at this and I brought it up, I'm wondering if people would wanna look at it, discuss it, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we have voter registration forms here when people come in.
Yeah,
I think you should have a voter registration You know, you go to get a library card, you open a bank account, you sign a lease, you should have the option to opt out, but otherwise.
It should be,
get
I mean,
registered.
I also think, I agree with that, that I think we should make it easier to register, and sometimes
Mhm.
if it's an opt-out, it's easier.
Mhm,
Because, so you're on it, if you don't go vote,
Mhm.
it's your choice,
Mhm.
but at least you don't have to go through that process of showing up at the
Mhm.
polling site, which often happens, and then
Mhm.
people aren't registered.
I registered at a street fair. You know? Just because there was a guy there.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I also registered at a street fair.
Yeah.
When I first moved to New York.
So Brendan, if you can please distribute the list of items here, the links to the website to the committee afterwards, and committee members can take a look. We can perhaps have a discussion on a resolution that would come out of this at our next committee meeting.
Yeah, the question is which ones other than, S 657, I know that legislation,
So,
but.
you know, I think Brenda, what would be useful is because I'd actually shared a bunch of other things. I didn't want to go through all that stuff right here, but Steve has all those other links. So I'll draft an email for you of that, and then you can send it to him.
Terrific, thank you.
Great.
I just want to revert back to open meetings law. Do we broadcast on Zoom our executive committee meetings?
Yes.
We do?
We broadcast all of the meetings.
Okay, that's what I thought. And we also make it available for clips, right? That was something I saw with the MTA. They, you know, YouTube has a clip feature.
Yeah, but we'd have to make those ourselves, and so we haven't.
Right, but you leave it available. The MTA, when they were talking about the congestion pricing, closed it off. So if you wanted to find out, if you wanted to spread the word about a particular objection, you weren't able to do the clip feature. You'd basically have to sit through 4 hours of testimony.
I don't know if ours is enabled or not.
No, you enable it. It is enabled. I checked after the MTA thing, and it should be. Because people, you know, if people express an opinion, they should be able to share it on social media. Right?
Great. Any other comments on this topic before we move on to the next one?
Yep.
Great. So we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the follow-up discussion on our CV6 budget request process. I don't think we're gonna have a significant discussion on this today. I just wanted to bring this back to our attention because the timing now before the summer, and I think that what the idea was behind this was that we were going to be able to improve the district needs statement and all of the different committees working on their budget request. And
Right.
so what we wanted to do was to give some guidance
Right.
to all those committees
Right.
about how to interact with us,
Right.
rather than wait until next year. So let me just finish.
Yep.
Jesus has started to prepare a document which kind of outlines the budget process and ways for us to provide this guidance to the other committees.
Mhm.
So what I wanted to do was just open it up to committee members to give any other input that they think they want to give into how we interact with other committees on this process. Next time, we will have a larger discussion with the document and we can share that, but
Okay.
it's not quite ready for prime time, so I just wanted to give a space for the committee to opine on, or if Jesus, you want to explain.
The document sort of meant to be sort of at least for a while, a work in progress. There are 2 elements. One small element is, how questions that the committees can ask to better and more efficiently go through evaluating budget requests. And the larger part of it is just a month by month breakdown. Okay, if it's January, you should be doing X, Y, Z as relates to the budget. If it's February, you should be doing X, Y, Z. If it's March, you should be doing, knowing that sometimes the dates will shift a little bit. But given that budget's agenda is very calendar based, as in certain times of year, you should be doing these things, and certain times of years, you should be doing these things. That's why I've been sort of kicking it around for a while now, but Nan coming forward and saying he would like something like that created the impetus to sort of try to pick it back up and try and finish it.
Mhm.
So there are 2 elements of that document.
Jim,
Just wonder, there is a provision in the charter that requires what is known as the district cabinet, which are all the service providers that are responsible for CD6 activities, to provide us with their own budget requests, which I've been on this committee for 25 years. And they have not, we have not done it that way, but we have gotten periodic budget requests. And the one that sticks in my mind, I think it was one of the firehouses, needed a new boiler or something, some boiler or some kind of physical infrastructure to their firehouse. And I think it would behoove us to follow what's in the charter and reach out to our district cabinet and solicit them for their advice. I sent a copy, a draft of a pro forma letter to the chair, that I'm happy to forward on to Jesus or whoever.
So what, can you just, for reference,
just-
what's the district cabinet? Because I have not
Oh,
heard
the-
this term before.
District cabinet is a provision also in the city charter. I think
Yeah.
it's section 207, not sure,
2705.
207.5,
2705.
2075.
2705.
2705. Knew there was twos and sevens in there. But it's basically sanitation, parks, cops,
Yeah.
education. It's kind of, it's not very distinct in the charter, in what's in the charter.
Yeah, so it's basically it's services in the district, like I know cabinet was like people who are actually in it, or, we have cabs for like some of the nonprofits or the hospitals have cabs that we work with as a community board.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so, but every community board is
Okay.
supposed to have a district cabinet.
yeah,
Jesus is supposed to be the chair.
yeah,
We convene it.
Hmm?
We convene it.
okay,
Who do you have here for it?
Whatever agencies will come.
Well-
And, Parks comes, the police precincts come, fire department. usually
Sanitation.
comes, Sanitation.
DOT.
DOT comes regularly, sanitation doesn't generally.
They're supposed
I
to.
have not I've never been made aware that there is a budget component to the district service cabinet.
Yeah,
And in fact, I'm looking at section 2705 right now and can't seem to find the word budget in there at all.
no, what it says is we're supposed to, that the community board is to solicit and they are to respond for budget requests. Let me get the letter that I sent, to the,
In the
the
meantime,
chair.
I want to
Yeah,
recognize
go ahead.
she has her hand raised.
So the reason I raised my hand, I think what Jesus is doing, and if the committee work something additional to it, because at the last executive committee meeting, when we were going over the agenda, and some of the committee chairs put the budget on, some people didn't have the budget on, and there was confusion as to when they would take up the budget requests or not. So I think explicit guidance is really significant, and it would be great if you could release it to us before the next meeting so we can take a look at it and add our stuff. Because I also wanted to add something additional that we don't do. We come up with our needs, we do it in writing, we send it around, but we don't take those needs and really advocate to our city council people and other things. We don't take it and say, we asked for X, Y, Z, we want to bring it to your attention. So I feel like it's a writing exercise. We are responded in writing, but we don't take the next step of really advocating for it. And I think that should be part of our process.
Thank you, B. I completely agree with that. And I would add to that I think sometimes the disconnect is that we don't advocate for things because they aren't actually that important, or they were things that were from nobody remembers why they were on there. And that disconnect is creating the disconnect of why we're not following up on those items, because they don't reflect the work that is most important to those certain committees who are putting it out there. So I think this,
Yeah.
the goal of this process is to really improve that entire system so that we're really focusing on the things that we want to advocate for, and then it generates the momentum so that we do the follow-up.
Yeah, no, and I think the one committee that where we have had, I would give an example, is in the Parks Committee for Dag Hammarskjöld, we did get Keith Powers. And that was something that we went as a committee, said, we're advocating for this, do you have budget for that? So I know Parks has done it, I don't know for other committees, because I don't serve on those other committees, but on Parks, we've definitely gone to the council members.
Great. Any other comments on this process? So what we will work on this, we will continue to work with Jesus on this document. We will share with the committee and hopefully improve our budget request process. Yes.
I just wanted to know that once this form is completed, we're looking at the next year for these committees to. So it's a number of months out before they're actually utilizing this, is that correct?
Well, the idea is we give them the guidance now, they should be discussing it at their May
Oh,
and
they
June
will.
meetings. They should be
Well, the
starting to discuss their community needs for next year.
The budget process is always happening, so, yeah, right now, October 31st, we have a deadline to submit to the city our budget requests for fiscal year 2026. So, the work that people are doing this month and next month, over the summer, September, should all be towards that end.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yes.
I'm sorry. This is pursuant to section 230A and 231B of the city charter. Trying to forward it to you.
What I would say, having conducted budget requests, district service cabinet meetings, and Brendan's always there right by my side. And perhaps he could attest. The district service cabinet is perhaps not necessarily the best place to solicit that kind of information. What I would suggest is there used to be a practice. I think it's fallen out of favor. Older district managers tell me that they used to do it, is where during the summer lull, they would bring agencies in to speak to, the district manager, committee chairs, or chair of the board about budget matters within the district. Maybe worth trying to revive some of that if the agencies are willing to do it. I'm not exactly sure why it fell out of favor, but the district service cabinet is largely for service delivery in the district. There are these issues that need multiple agencies to address them, things like that. It might surprise people if I should start asking them, okay, tell me what you need, tell me this, tell me that, and perhaps we wouldn't be talking to the right people who would have that information. So it may be worth we've got specific agencies that are like real well represented in our budget requests, like Parks, for example, or like DOT, that we maybe set meetings aside separately where we discuss these sorts of things. But that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, presumably the other committees also know, where to direct their queries so that they're getting the kind of input they need.
Right. I mean, and the thing is, one thing that the citywide statement of needs for facilities that we just did taught us is that the information you're going to get from the city in a report is going to be paltry. You need to go and do the legwork and find the person who will tell you more. And we did that only with like the 4 projects that we had in our district in that report. And that was weeks and weeks and weeks of work. And we have over 50 on the budget requests, trying to go to all of them and be like, what's the status with this? And what's the status with this? Because sometimes they're tight-lipped and sometimes they don't answer their emails and sometimes this. That's why it may be worth considering that with the budget requests, a sort of less is more approach, because then you have less to follow up on. But there's so much back and forth, and it's like, it is at times like pulling teeth, that it's probably better to do some of this outreach, getting information by email or in individual meetings with the agencies, because just sort of doing it at the district service cabinet. I mean, Brendan, unless you.
Yeah.
How would that even, would you even think that would work?
Yeah, like if I were to ask an agency, like, what budget requests do you want? We would probably get from most agencies, either I don't know, or we'll need to look into this and get back to you, and maybe agencies would get back to me, maybe they won't.
Or we don't need anything. Agencies, especially in recent years, have been known that when asked, if we could wave a wand and get you something for your agency, the response they tend to give is, oh, we're meeting all our requirements and we have everything that we need. And so
ask them, ask them.
but I would suggest much more tailored, targeted.
Yeah. Outreach.
And tailored, in fact, like asking specific, I had to go up to these agencies and ask them very specifically, do you mean this or do you mean this? What about this? What about this? Because that's the only way they're gonna answer.
So with the agencies, like say transportation or sanitation, so with parks, we have someone who works in our district with us,
Right.
right? And she comes to every parks meeting and talks to us, and even then, she doesn't know, like, we have Constance Bay from Motley, they came to us directly to say we need the elevator fixed, and Parks doesn't even know about those kind of issues sometimes, right? So how does it work with the other agencies? Like, is there somebody who, for our district, that we can speak to, who know a lot of this stuff, but not everything, the way kind of we have? with parks?
Yes, virtually every agency will have a liaison to other agencies, and so that's who we talk to.
Yeah,
But they're almost never the person to talk to about budgetary matters.
okay,
So they can probably help us get to that person, or depending on like for the citywide statement of needs report or the budget requests that come back, there's always going to be a chart saying, if you have questions for this agency, reach out to this person. So there are ways to find these people. But we all have a liaison, but they're almost never the person that you actually need to talk to about these things. But I gotta say, I have to agree with what Dee said, that we are not, with our budget requests, we are talking the talk, but not walking the walk, essentially. And we need to go to our elected officials and be like, hey, we've passed this in the budget requests. We need to know what you are doing to help bring this about. Even at full board, where the electeds come and they speak and they direct the conversation, talking to us about what they want to talk about. It could be that maybe the board should strategize, and every meeting, at least one or two questions should be, what have you been doing lately to bring XYZ budget requests or priorities of the board about? Because we've got them there. And if we're just putting it on a wish list, essentially, and hoping for Santa Claus to bring it down the chimney, that's effectively what we're doing if we're not actually doing anything more to bring them about.
And one other suggestion I have to keep it top of mind is that we add that to the agenda of our committee meeting every month to check in and see, or maybe not every month, but check in and see, where are we on the budget request items that we have, are we following up? What's the status? So we talk about it, and it's not just something in the air table that we look at once a year, but something that it's kind of on our
this
agenda.
committee or all the committees?
All committees.
Well, that's something I would recommend that you speak to Sandy and board leadership about, because if the budget committee has sort of expressed a similar wish before, and this time around, we sort of put it on everyone's agenda, but it didn't seem like it, I guess there was a disconnect somewhere, and at least one committee chair was confused, like, I didn't put that on there, why is that on there? We've had the discussion already, and we're not discussing it again. So that needs to come from you guys, that needs to come, the budget committee needs to say, all right, Sandy, exec, we agree that this is the way to go, and this is what's gonna be done from now on. Because
and I think that's part of the guidance document that we're preparing, so that we can all see that, but we're all on board with, this is the process that we want to follow. And
I think anyone who serves on another committee, to make sure that your committee is also keeping in track, because what I realized, last year with some of the chairs, because we had new chairs, they had no idea where to begin and what to do and needed guidance and help. And there was a hesitation to even bring it up as an item because they're like, I need to understand what we're doing here.
Mhm.
So every time we have a new chair, committee chair, we
Right,
need to
and-
have that.
That's part of the problem is that we've had some bad handoffs over the
Yeah.
years from committee chairs, to committee chairs. And a lot of the procedural stuff gets lost
Yeah.
in the transition. And maybe over the summer, we should take some time to create an archive that can be passed from leader to leader. From
Yeah.
one
Yeah, or when someone
generation.
becomes a committee chair, just tell them that this is one of the things you need to do as committee chair, because I don't think that's been done.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be nice to have documentation, like a manual of some sort,
That is something we've been floating around.
Yeah.
The office is working on certain things, like for certain tasks, there's so many different things that the board does that need to be, put down on paper.
Right.
And we're working on some of them. This document that Steve is referencing is in part something that for the budget committee. In a lot of ways, the budget committee has it easy because it's much more defined what you have to do this thing this year and this year.
Mhm.
It's much more defined, whereas other committees get their stuff thrown at them from every which way and you never know what it's gonna be. So we're gonna try that, especially with the prospect of term limits coming up in 3 years' time.
You're gonna have a
There'll
whole
be
new
some
board.
folks that are gonna be chirped off, and we want that institutional knowledge is gonna go with some paper.
Yeah.
One thing I might suggest is, and we, the office, Steve, Nad, Reshma, previous budget chairs have done a lot of thinking about like how to revamp the process. It occurs to me in having this conversation, maybe the two most fundamental things that the committee can do and other chairs can do, other committees can do, so that this process, the budget requests make a little bit more sense is, one, know very clearly what the request is, and two, know what the current status of the request is. And I think that, Reshma, it was something Reshma said that really sparked the thought that some committee chairs just don't even know where to begin. It's not that they don't want to, so they don't know how to start. That is probably the best way, the best avenue to open the door. These requests need to be crystal clear. We need to be crystal clear what they are. It's all in the past, the board has sometimes fallen into the trap of, it's our understanding that X, Y, Z, and we believe and we think. No, you have to know what these requests are and make it clear, because if you don't know, then no one else will know. And then what is the current status? That isn't necessarily always going to be evident from the description, and the information, the updates that we get from the agency in the report itself are going to be like one sentence, so it's not going to almost tell you anything. But if we always have it in our mind, what do we want? And then where does it stand? The what do we want will be clear from the report, but where does it stand? We know that we can reach out and start asking the right questions to figure out where it stands. It seems like that's the crux of it, those two questions.
Yeah, I'd like to go to B, et cetera.
Yeah, so I want to comment on what Jesus said. Having sat on the committee for a number of years and listened to, there's different chairs of different committees, but people accepting what was submitted 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and they can't even articulate it. So I think Jesus had said leaner is better because you could have a more effective budget and you could advocate and stuff. I remember statements, and when you see the agency's response, we don't know what we're asking. They don't know how to respond, so we get bureaucratic stuff. So I think it's almost like zero-based budgeting. You have to start with what do you really want, and not because it was there 6 years ago, go with the item. And that's what I've seen over the years. So I would hope we could break that cycle.
Go ahead,
I'll
Reshma.
let Eva look.
Everyone.
I just want to know on the form that you're constructing, is there a deadline that is on the form so that even if they're distilling each committee to make it more and more specific, they have an idea of how to tailor it and when they have to present it to us. So that even that structure is in the form. Is there going to be a deadline
Yes.
put on the form itself?
Yes, the only hard deadline is the October 31st deadline for this district needs statement. The deadline for the letter of comment, the deadline for the statement of the citywide statement of needs for facilities, that shifts depending on when the report comes out. But the hard deadlines, as far as we know them, even the movable deadlines, will all be mentioned in there. And maybe we can adapt it as we go along
Yes.
year to year.
But is there a deadline for each committee to submit their distilled direct request to this committee?
That there is not. I don't have the authority to
See-
impose that. It would have to come from you,
Sure
from the
does.
exec.
I think we should ask that. As you were saying, they make it more streamlined, but they have to know the date that we are to get it.
You know, I think that's a good, I mean, what I was gonna say is we had a discussion, I think it was at our November meeting, where this year, rather than just send them the table with the stuff filled in from the past, we're sending them a blank sheet, like starting from scratch to make sure people think about it. And I'd like to add that last year, I also think that we have too many things and we should cut. And last year we did try to cut and we said, if nobody can justify this, they're advocating for this, we're cutting it. And then when we went to the full board to present our air table, people were like, well, why did that get taken off? Why did that taken off? And I was like, well, no one spoke up. And I had emailed everybody, we talked about it, and you know, no committee members. I mean, yeah.
Just maybe put a cap of 5 for 5 items for
Yeah.
each
So we
committee.
used to have a blank, like
And
start
do
from
it a
scratch.
blank and a blank.
And 5 requests for each, and we give it a deadline in September sometime, because our public meeting will be September, our September budget meeting will be the public meeting.
Mhm. And that makes, yeah. When's the mayor doesn't do his budget until January, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have the November update, right? And then you'll have, because the budget first, I mean, it would.
Mayor-
Yeah.
The mayor does his first
First
round
round,
and then
But that's what,
that's
yeah,
January.
but we're looking at the following year
Yeah,
anyway.
no,
Yeah,
2026.
yeah.
Fiscal 2026.
Well, this is actually a great segue into the next item on the agenda, because one of the things that we wanted to do was to look at this committee's budget requests. And I think there's some cleanup that we can possibly do on our own requests.
Okay,
So let's move to that. And Brendan, if you can pull up and filter on budget and governmental affairs on our budget request items. We have 1 capital request and 5 expense requests.
Just give me a moment.
Can you make the font a little bigger? Because
Yeah, just give me a moment. I guess I can have it so that we're looking at budget committee requests. Just give me a moment.
maybe we should use the read-only version, just in case. We don't want to.
yeah.
I'll make changes.
Yeah, but also.
Or is the committee going to make changes today?
Let's
Well-
let's play it safe.
I think the idea is to make some changes
Okay.
and
Well,
clean up, so.
Then,
Yeah, just give me a moment.
in the full version it is.
I'd rather do them with a pencil at this point.
Okay, I'm almost there. Here we go. So these are all the.
Yeah, if you can open the first one, let's just. go
Yeah,
down.
or if you just read out, if you can't see.
Yeah, open the,
And
This
there.
is,
Yeah.
the font I know is a bit.
Okay, yeah, no, this we can read, it was from the annual for, when it was this.
Brendan, can I ask you to send that to me? Because I can't read it off the screen, so I'm gonna ask you to send that later to me.
Yeah, sure. Also, I don't know if this larger font is better for people.
I think that works.
And just a reminder, the budget requests always live on the home page of the CB6 website. There's gonna be right there, underneath the picture of the skyline. You'll see a little icon that says budget request. You can find them there 24/7.
So this one, we know we are advocating for having more facilities for us. Right, so we can have meetings and not have to be looking around for meeting space all the time.
So if you look, yeah, but the thing is, if you look at the agency response, it says there are no city facilities available for you.
Right.
So here's where I think we need to be a little bit more tailored to the way that we approach this, because as you recall, with the new Spark facility that is coming online, we did pass, part of the resolution that we passed
Yeah.
in support of the Spark facility specifically called for a space for CB6 and our committees and our board to meet. But this request reflects none of that.
Right.
So why, shouldn't it?
How did Spark respond to our request though?
We'll think about it.
Yeah.
Essentially, what it is.
But
I think
my
that's right up
question is,
there with the housing, right, that we asked for.
but the point is, we need to align our requests and make sure that we're talking with the same voice. So this does not mention anything about us asking for facility. I mean, it's one thing for the city agent to say, well, fine, there's no city, but we know there is space coming into the district that is, well, okay, it's not gonna be online next year. It's some ways down the line, but still, it feels like this kind of
Yeah, and the
request
agency may not be
should
thinking about
reflect-
future, because they're looking at what's there now. I mean, we're limited on the amount of words we can put in this, because I'd want to phrase it in a way that perhaps you consider the Sparks facility, because we wouldn't want, to have them think we only want that facility and nothing else.
Then that's a good point, yes, because, honestly, the location here is better than the location over there, all the way of past First Avenue, but there's a city location over there and this is rented. So I agree with Steve, if assuming what he's saying is that we need to update this and make it more, refer more to what we've done recently. But this is a good example of, even though we haven't kept the blurb up to date, we have done advocacy on this. Every single time every opportunity we get to speak to EDC, who's doing the Spark project, we're like, CB6 needs a space. Catty corner to the Spark project, there's another building that they're building. They need a space. And tying in the work that you guys did with the statement of needs for facilities, had the city just read that report, because it's the Poison Control Center has been on the report for 2 years now. They would have maybe tried to find a space for the Poison Control Center. So this is a pattern with the city that, they're not looking right in front of their nose, but there are agencies that need space and they're over here claiming that they don't have any. So yes, we, as Reshma alluded to, we only have 800 characters. The blurb is only going to be 800 characters, because the city won't accept more. But we could rewrite this and incorporate all those new details.
Is there any way to hotlink what's on there to our database of resolutions?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
In other
Create a
words,
link.
a hyperlink
Hyperlink.
on this software?
To link this to,
Like a particular thing that we've done that we're requesting money for, is there some way that we can hyperlink it to our resolution database?
Yeah.
So that,
like, for example, this page right here, if you wanted to include this particular page in the text of a resolution, the link is up there. Yeah, we could do
okay,
that.
no, I mean, link this to the database of resolutions. In other words, this would be the independent variable, and then the hyperlink would be the dependent.
Are you saying have a link to the resolution here, like in this text?
Right, this text links to our resolution
On Sparks,
database.
for example.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
that's
that
what
can
he's
easily
saying.
be
Yeah,
in the
you just
text.
add a link. in
Yeah,
there.
that can easily be done.
Yeah, okay. Maybe we should do that next time we send them.
But keep in mind that this is for you guys. This does not get sent to the city. This is just for your benefit.
Okay,
Because we needed a way that everyone could view.
right,
So this does not get sent to the city. We have to put it into a portal the city provides.
I'm sorry, you have to put it into a portal.
Mhm.
I just had a question. In the past, for certain committees, there could be representatives that made a presentation to the agency itself. I mean, you talked about representatives from the agency coming here, but when it comes to our space, new facilities, is there any way that members of this particular committee will be able to make a presentation directly to the agency on their premises so that we can discuss the issue and what is vital for us to have in terms of space? Is there some way for us to do the reverse and go meet with them at the agency in a presentation form?
I'm not so sure I would call it a presentation, but if we had slides that we wanted to put together, we could. But that sounds very much just like an offline meeting. We would have a meeting with the agency. It would probably be DCAS, it would probably be OMB, it would probably be, we would have to involve our city council members because more than likely, they would be the ones pushing and pushing and pushing to get DCAS to agree to meet with us. I mean, it's possible. It's possible.
Is that over the head of this committee, or that's something that we can facilitate within this committee to make the presentation regarding the space that we need?
I would run it by the chair of the board, but no, if the committee really thinks that this is the way to go, I don't think it's impossible. Whether the city wants to come to the table over that, that's another matter. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no. You know,
I was just curious how anybody felt about that, where we would go in person to the agency itself and make the presentation.
I mean,
I mean, the question I have is, are there facilities even present in the district that we would want? Because I wouldn't want to go to an agency without a specific ask.
Mhm.
So if, for example, a site like Spark that is available, that would make sense for us to go and make a pitch.
Yeah.
For.
is available is gonna be the hard part, that are potentially.
That meets our needs. I
Yeah.
guess that's what I mean by available, that we want to have as a space.
Well, even that, the meets our needs part is complicated because Spark was developed without bearing in mind that the community board wants space.
Yeah.
Spark was developed without bearing in mind that the Poison Control Center needs a call center space and needs to be near Bellevue. So I think part of the resistance that we've been encountering is that they would have to shoehorn us in there. They would have to shoehorn the Poison Control Center, for example, they'd have to shoehorn us in there, plans that they've already long made. The building that's catty corner, the public health building, same thing. They have envisioned that without bearing in mind anything that we need. So we would need to convince them to change their plans to fit us in there. Or we would need to convince them to rent us more space or buy a space, somewhere else. But which may be a hard sell, but maybe as the meeting landscape changes, they'll be more receptive to it. I don't know.
Go ahead, Jim.
Are there spaces like at CUNY where they have regular meetings of faculty or staff or students where we could do a kind of a shared work arrangement like hoteling, like they do in industry? They call it hoteling. You go, you use it this week, you book it, you get that space. Somebody else needs it, they book it,
In recent years, CUNY has not made their spaces available to us unless we pay for them.
Really?
Yeah. And we're talking in the neighborhood of
Oh.
$1,000 or $2,000 a pop. Which we don't have the budget for.
No, of course not. But it's empty space. It's empty
Their
otherwise.
response to me was, we make the governor pay for space. I'm not sure that's actually true, but that's their attitude.
I was gonna say I think that also in this situation, right, part of the problem is like the reason why neither one of these buildings had any idea about community boarding spaces because they probably don't even know about us, right? Because especially EDC, it operates very separately. And really, we need to involve the borough president in this because shouldn't that person, since we come under the borough president, be the person advocating for us
And you
in this
guys,
situation?
you guys did in your resolution on
Yeah.
the citywide statement of needs, you
Yeah.
call on the borough president to please advocate on
Yeah.
our behalf.
Yeah,
And even before then, we have asked the
Yeah.
borough presidents to please do something. You know, I supposedly efforts were made. I don't know, obviously nothing came of that.
B, go ahead.
Think on the particular item that we're talking about, given the experience that we've had with the city and their space acquisition process, I would not assume that this would be something that we'd actually go to them and have a discussion. Because as we remember, for those of us that was on the board, when we were thrown out of 47th Street, we were at the police center for 22 months, 24 months. Finding space was difficult. This is a whole different process within the city. So I think it's necessary to talk about budget, but you're not going to break the thing of space. I've just watched it at the state level, the city level, and the federal level.
That's another place that has a big auditorium. Police academy.
what's interesting is nonprofits can buy buildings with capital funding that you would get from the borough president's office. Which happens, they put 10%, 90% comes from borough president. And in a situation like that, perhaps we could ask that a community board would be able to have, I don't know what's in our district, I know in other districts that there's spaces like that, that we could have that space to use for meetings because it is technically city funded.
We need space for what?
Yeah, like I think a good
60
example
people?
is a very beautiful space, the Give Me Center down in, by there on Chambers Street, which was done through city capital money.
Space for 60 people, basically, right?
Well,
65.
At the very bare minimum, it depends on, so one of the reason that this issue has been a little bit more nebulous as of late because of the pandemic. When we were all meeting on Zoom, we kind of let this go
Mhm.
because why are we asking for physical meeting space when we're all on Zoom?
Yeah.
And if in fact, we're going to have a largely on Zoom future, I don't know, then maybe this particular ask does not become as important.
Mhm.
But if meeting in person is always going to be some part of what the community board is, then this is still very much relevant. And as far as, as far as sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'll stop. Did I answer your
The
question?
size, yeah, the size of the.
Oh, the size.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
what the size.
Yeah.
Right now, we make do with about 60
65.
seats. We make do with about 60 seats because very rarely does every board member for full board show up in
Yep.
person. And these days, the public prefer to show up online
Zoom.
as opposed to in person. The only times when that won't be enough is if there's going to be a particularly contentious issue that is gonna draw a crowd. I'm talking your casinos, your Mount Sinai closings, things like that, that can easily draw 200-300 people. I don't think we're gonna be, I think it's a huge lift to say, you should get the community board a 300 person auditorium, that'd be nice, but I don't know, most meetings, we will not need that.
Mhm.
And there are venues for such things. I would recommend in those cases to let the electeds organize those meetings, because they are not subject to the open meetings law. We are, and oftentimes venues that have those bigger spaces have a lot of restrictions that run afoul of the open meetings law. But for most of our purposes, 60 to 70 seats would be fine.
Yeah.
Well, can I suggest to keep this more up to date? The language in this is that we perhaps as things come online, or at least as we become aware of things, or as the committee or the board becomes aware of spaces, that we add potential sites are.
Mhm.
And we can put Spark in there, but it could be something else, it just, the fact that it doesn't, right now it sounds generic and,
Yeah.
I
No, I
just
mean,
feel
I
like
think,
we
I
should
think
put
that
something.
it should be updated, and you
Yeah.
as vice chair, I mean, we can all say we wanna do it and
Right.
take a, consensus, but you as vice chair can just talk to the chair and have that change too, you don't need it, one's
I
approval.
mean, school auditoriums are like the most obvious answer, because they're not used in the evening for the most part.
Sometimes some schools we've reached out to, they're not ADA compliant. Others are, hard to deal with. So, even almost every single time we've reached out to an outside party for meeting space, there's always some sort of
Mhm.
friction there.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just easier for us to have our own space.
yeah. We used to go to that school, the school, I think it's for performing arts, up on 50, I wanna say 56.
There were issues there. Sometimes there wouldn't be microphones. Sometimes the internet didn't work very well there. And especially that.
It was a new school.
That's
what it was.
that's a deal breaker now that the law doesn't require, well, actually, so long as we have members on Zoom, then we have to be all hybrid.
No, I hear you.
If we want to go all back to in person, that's it, no other option, then we don't have to do the hybrid, but a hybrid is only required if at least one member is online.
Can we move to the next one so that we can just keep it moving? The next one I think is under operating. So this is relation to noise being our number one complaint in the district. We're asking for more inspectors. And then can you go to the agency, just scroll down to the agency response? Please contact the agency directly and promptly for more information. Do we know that has happened?
Not as far.
Not as far as I know.
So it needs to go on our to-do
It was
list.
a go-to transportation, DOT.
No, this
No,
is,
DEP.
This is
Department of
DEP, I
Environmental
mean,
Protection.
this is our budget item, so it goes to us. And presumably.
No, I'm talking about the agency.
Oh, the
The
agency.
agency is DEP,
Reach out.
DEP.
Department of Environmental Protection.
Brendan, do you know if noise is still our number one complaint? I'm not even, because this was written years ago, I'm not sure if that's still true.
I would need to check 311 data, to be completely honest, but I can add that to the to-do list to check. There at least used to be a way to check 311 data by community district to see which complaints are most prevalent.
Yeah,
so.
and also in the open data, or there's in one of the trainings
Yeah.
that we've had, now there've been so many recently, but this was one a while ago, you can just look up where the noise is, or where the most noise complaints are coming.
34th Street,
Yeah.
Queenstown.
Interesting fact, 43rd and 2nd where I live was the place with no noise complaints, like for years.
But yeah, I think we can update this language to reflect,
Yeah.
current data in open
Yeah.
data rather than kind of the vague wording that's here.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that in the past, not necessarily for this, but for other issues where we did say, please contact the agency directly. And when you do contact the agency, that's just kind of a generic response, and it's hard to even get a response from the agency or find the right person who can address it. I mean, I
But
don't know if
you
that's
need
been
to-
your experience.
You need to plug away.
Yeah.
You need to ask,
Mhm.
you need to
Yeah.
ask, and
Yeah.
because sometimes they're not gonna be super clear, either
Yeah,
on
sometimes
purpose or
that's
just
it.
because they're not very clear. And then you ask follow-up, and you go and you go and you go until you get the answer that you need.
Yes, yeah, and that's why I just wanted to
That's-
add that this is not gonna be that simple as just making a phone call.
That's part of the role, I think, of intended role for the district cabinet, though. That, get them aligned with you, follow up with them and put the pressure on that work.
Once we have the thing, but like, if we're trying to get them to come up with, if we're trying to get our DEP guy, who always comes to our cabinet. If we're trying to get him to say, we need more noise inspectors in Community District 6, I don't think it's gonna happen.
No.
But once we determine that we need that, then we can go to him and say,
Right.
hey, can you help us break through?
But we've done that on our budget request, so.
But this is old, so we would need to see if this even still holds water.
So we can, but assuming it's still valid, we can.
Yeah.
solicit
I
him
mean,
to
it
assist
came,
us.
the issue came up at full board just last week.
Yeah.
So I would say there are still people who are very much concerned
Yeah.
about the noise. So,
Yeah, I mean, the heliport is definitely an issue where people don't.
so I think it's still relevant. It's just worth updating some of the facts,
Mhm.
and doing the follow-up. So that's a to-do item for,
What else we got there?
let's go to the next one.
So who's gonna task, who are we tasking to do this follow-up then?
I'll work with Matt on that one.
Yeah, we're not following it up?
No, to follow up, I will
Yeah.
follow up with Matt.
You're gonna follow it up, all right?
The next one is the sanitation street side waste basket service. So can we go to the agency response? Just scroll down.
Oh, I should scroll down a bit further to account
Yeah.
for the captioning.
Can you move the caption out of the way?
Yeah, I can move
Not
it
really.
maybe to the right.
Yeah.
So although the Department of Sanitation supports this program due to fiscal constraints, the availability of funds is uncertain. And I don't know when that was written.
Like
But-
No,
6 months ago.
yeah, it's current.
You're
because-
right,
Yeah,
but
Mhm.
the budget situation has changed.
yeah,
Since
I mean,
that
or,
time.
yeah.
This was probably written like 6 months ago.
Right, so that was when we were projecting giant deficits and now we have a surplus in the city budget. So I just am not sure.
Incidentally, have any of you used those compost bins that are posted around the city in the app?
No, I haven't. There aren't any really close to where I am.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm.
They're more down where you are.
There's several down
Yeah.
there. They're very handy.
Why don't we do this? We have regular communication with the Department of Sanitation. Why don't we look into this? And we can try and find out, whether this is still really necessary, and report back to the committee. And look, and the office is happy to do all of these, but again, all the back and forth times 50, times 60,
Right.
it
Yeah.
becomes a bit much.
Yeah.
Are we still seeing the overflows from the trash? I haven't seen a lot of it. Have you?
Brandon
guys had
is
complaints?
making.
Yes, in places, though right now I'm finding that according to constituents, it's caused more by the fact that there are a number of baskets that have gotten broken and it has taken like forever and a day for new replacement baskets to not just be ordered, but to actually come. So yes, we do have issues with overflowing baskets and part of the district, particularly in the upper 20s, low 30s. But due to like a shortage of physical baskets.
Mhm.
And just sort of anecdotally, that's not just the case in our district. I've been on 7th Avenue and I've seen similar issues. I know that's not in our district, but
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
to highlight the issue.
And again, I would advocate, going back to the advocacy point, the city's budget situation has improved since, the 6 months ago, but certain things, like for instance, the library closures was an issue that the city council is really pushing for as they push back on the mayor's budget. And so something like this is also worth talking to a city council member for, to say, this is also something we wanna
Mhm.
really focus on.
And Rashma, do you recall how this got placed on our radar to begin with? Like, who brought this up as a need in the district? Was this responding to constituents from the office? Was it somebody on the committee? Was it?
Yeah, so it was on a committee, I don't remember who on the committee, but it was something that was brought up, especially, and this is relatively new from my recollection, because we really started seeing this overflow happening post-pandemic with the outdoor dining. Oh, maybe Brendan remembers.
Yeah, well, also, when the pandemic started, one of the budget cuts that happened when the pandemic started
Yeah.
was
Sanitation.
of sanitation, street side waste basket service, and that became a huge controversy. It resulted in, cans overflowing. And, while I can't say 100% for sure, like, there was that controversy that, constituents complained about and probably was the nexus of this
Yeah,
request.
but this came about pandemic.
Okay.
I'm
Jim,
curious, why is this a budget committee, budget priority? Shouldn't this be street activities or perhaps even transportation?
well, it's ours because someone here brought it up.
Yeah, it was brought in committee as opposed to in another committee.
Also, there's no real committee that takes sort of,
Sanitation.
these
health?
sorts of agencies.
Don't we do both?
Well, I mean, one could look,
Health and Human
one could say
Services?
sanitation is health, it's environment,
Right.
it's potentially transportation. In that sort of mishmash, it sort of landed in budget as a governmental affairs,
Like congestion
Or-
pricing
or-
ending up in traffic,
or budget, so.
transportation, whatever it was. Never made any sense to me.
So is there any follow-up on this one?
Well, this we can do, we can reach out to sanitation to sort of see where we stand with this.
You guys can field that?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, should we go to the next one? Okay, graffiti removal program. And the agency response is this inquiry needs to be directed elsewhere. But I'm not
To who?
certain what that means because they haven't told us. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know the background of this program or it's
Yeah, I have no
not
idea,
DSNY.
yeah, and I frankly haven't seen any graffitis. I was actually even shocked when this had come up.
This is another pandemic one.
Yeah, it was definitely
We
pandemic.
were starting to see it graffiti during the pandemic, so, that's not helpful, is it? They might have well just told us, hey, not our problem.
Brendan,
Yeah, what I wonder, and I can't say this for sure, but what I wonder is, so graffiti is an issue that at least during my time at CD6 has sort of bounced around from one agency to another. When I started here, it was EDC through their graffiti free NYC program. That program got suspended at the start of the pandemic, several months or a year into the pandemic. NYPD took more of an active role in terms of helping with graffiti on more of an ad hoc basis. But then Graffiti Free NYC restarted. Subsequently, the issue of graffiti has been handed off to Department of Sanitation. So what I wonder with this request is if this request were still, now we need to check at the actual like register of budget requests. But I wonder if this request were still directed to EDC at the time, since they used to
They run
deal
the
with
program.
graffiti. And like, if that were the case, then it's not a surprise that they would say the request should be directed elsewhere, i.e. sanitation.
We'll look into that.
Yeah, we'll need to look into that, though.
okay,
They should just fund an anti-graffiti program and have a separate contractor do it. That's what, my building got tagged. We had it off the building within 16 hours. And you couldn't even see shadows of it. And that's how you combat graffiti, because if it's gone, nobody's gonna take the time to repeat it. And that's the efficient way to do it. You can't send it to an agency and let them screw around with it for 3 and 4 and 6 weeks. And while more graffiti accumulates on the same spot, in the same neighborhood, et cetera. Hit it immediately and get it out of there. And that makes, the taggers are gone. They realize it's pointless. And fund it. It's my view.
Yeah, I mean, my question would be to have people seen graffiti, like, again, in 2020, when things were shut down, we saw there was increase in graffiti, as people have said, right? I've not seen things around recently, but I'll let Brendan.
Brendan,
Yeah, that's something the committee will need to ask as to
Yeah.
whether this is still an issue.
Yes,
Like speaking on the office's end, from a service request standpoint, back in 2020, graffiti was one of the biggest constituent complaints we
Yeah.
got.
Yeah.
It was a vexing issue
Yeah.
because no agency seemed capable of taking care of that
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we have barely any graffiti service
Yeah.
requests, maybe 1 or 2 that I can think of among my service requests.
It's graffiti, there's graffiti on First Avenue, like in the 20s. I see,
But the thing is, the question is,
If there's a vacant storefront, they're gonna tag it.
if it's a private building, the private building should be dealing with it,
Yeah.
not the city.
Yeah.
We're talking about city property.
Like we had during the pandemic, when New Wave Pier opened, which was late pandemic, right away it got graffiti. Like the next day, right after it opened, like the gate or whatever around there, I was trying to think, right? Like that was not only a big thing, but it was very sad because we just opened a new park and it got graffiti.
Yeah. Maybe the answer is to have this, cause I see it mostly on private buildings and where there's vacant space. And maybe the answer is to impose a fine if the graffiti stays for maybe more than 72 hours. Cause it's kind of it spreads, you know? It's just a sign that people aren't paying attention.
Either way, though, I'm wondering, does this belong on our city needs statement for our borough? I mean, for our.
Yeah, is it that
district?
important?
Is
Like,
it that-
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
would,
think we need more data on that, so I think the office looking into it is great.
Will do.
right. Anecdotally, we know the requests are down, but if we get the numbers, I think that will give us some justification for being able to say it can come off the list or it still needs to be there.
And you're only looking at city properties and facilities. So if somebody tags Beth Israel,
Well, we're looking at anything that gets reported to us, whether it's private or public. And then how once we make that determination, then we triage it appropriately.
who do you send it to if it's a private building? DOB?
Well, right now, it's still DSNY. DSNY can work with the property owners, I believe. But Brendan handles them more. The DSNY works with private property owners to get it fixed, right?
Correct. I mean, there does need to be cooperation from private property owners, which with the one service request related to graffiti that I can think of, that's a bit of an obstacle because that private property owner, they've abandoned the property, so clearly they don't care
Yeah.
enough to not have it abandoned, let alone not having.
Maybe in the future, and maybe we should solicit the elected officials to maybe move that over to DOB and have it cited as a building violation. And let fines accrue. You know? And put a lien on the building so that when the guy goes to sell it, he ends up getting hit for his fines. Rather than having DSNY do it for free. That's my,
Maybe we table that for now and move on to the next item. This one was for job training programs. And the current year response is that HRA's Career Services provides services to clients to system. It just describes the services they already
Yeah.
provide.
So this was again, came about during pandemic, again, something I necessarily don't think we should have. Because there's actually quite a few job training programs that have come about since then. But anytime we have something on, every time we have a discussion, it's very hard to then get consensus to take off.
I can't recall, since this has been on, one committee agenda this has been on.
so delete it.
Correct. And I would say, I mean, given where we're at record unemployment.
Yeah, that's right, we actually need more employees.
Yeah, we don't necessarily, I don't see this as an issue, and especially the demographics of our community board district. I do not see this as a major need for CB6. And so I would suggest.
Yeah,
And then when it
It
came
can be
about,
deleted.
we didn't know the situation again, 2020, but also the idea was not even so much, it's upskilling, for people to do jobs once, things were shut. So I'm gonna make a motion to take this off the list.
Yeah, I'm gonna second that motion because there are already so many existing training programs and we're not being very specific.
Yeah,
Do we take a roll
do we do
call
it by
vote
acclamation?
or
I
any opposed?
Do it
yeah, I think that, I think this is
Any
acclamation.
any opposed to removing this?
Yeah, because
item?
this is not a resolution, we don't need to.
Yeah, if you oppose, well, first of all, if you support, taking this off, just raise your hand. Physical or Zoom. Just so that we have a count for our records.
Looks unanimous. Yeah,
Anyone opposed?
the item is hereby removed.
The item is hereby removed and
It will be slated for removal. It's not technically removed until full board votes it removed, in October.
Okay,
So what we do is we put.
tag it as.
And we should also discuss with the chair who's sick tonight, right? Like I just want Nat to be able to.
Okay, shall we move to the next?
yeah, just doing it for our records as well. Okay, this is the next one.
Last one was budget increase for the community boards and the agency response. Is each community board's budget is being maintained?
Meaning,
Yeah.
So that's a no.
meaning no decrease, but
That's
no
a no,
increase.
and that's bureaucratic.
Yeah,
Well, de facto decrease if you account for inflation,
Right.
to be brutally honest.
that's true because we have, after a long time, had pretty high inflation.
When was the last time we had a budget increase?
It depends on what you mean. Like,
Actually.
if you mean a sort of nominal amount, we have one almost every year.
Mhm.
If you mean I need to look, it's been a while since I need to look.
Was there any specific need that a line item need that we needed for the budget increase, or was this a general? That was my critique of the language here, is that was generic and.
At the time that this was written, because this has been on for quite a minute, I think it was more general. Now, I would say that community boards, especially community boards in Manhattan, really need budget increases because they are falling behind for payroll, relative to private industry and other agencies.
Mhm.
Because I've seen just since right before the pandemic and now, the starting salary for staffers has gone up $5,000-10,000. And when community boards budgets are so minuscule, that which a DOT, a DOB can absorb, like that, community boards, it presents a hardship to them. So if they are going to keep, attract good staff and keep the good staff
Attract
they
and
have,
retain.
then they need to have more money available to them for salaries.
yeah, I think we should put that.
Does the
Yeah.
city have classifications of employees like the feds
Mhm.
do? They do?
Yep.
The city does?
Absolutely.
They're different, they're called different things and like the rankings,
Gradients, yeah.
but they have.
So you guys should be getting whatever.
Union staffers do, but even those start very low. I'm not union, so I'm not subject to
Are
that.
you a union?
Yeah,
I'm union.
Yeah, and then do you guys get COLA increases every year?
no,
You don't, so that actually is problematic given
Yeah.
the inflation right now. So you just don't get any kind of increase then.
Sometimes the union, for example, will
Yeah.
push through an increase as it did recently.
Yeah,
As far as managers go, the mayor will
Yeah.
push through an increase
Yeah.
as he did, as he's about to do right now,
yeah,
for management. And if the only, barring that, staff would need to get, their board or their board chair to agree to a raise.
That's
Yeah.
not right. You guys should be like, like for the feds, they have GS-12s and GS-14s and all the other ones. If you're doing basically the same job as a supervisor at DOT, let's say, you should be compensated the same.
But essentially, so back when this was written, it was generic. Now I would say every community, I'm not sure every community board has this in their budget request. If not, they should. But nowadays, every community board should advocate for this so that they can retain their staff. And what makes it complicated is that the city likes to keep all the budgets for all the community boards the same. that's a problem because in the outer boroughs where the districts are much sleepier,
Mhm.
you can get by on a very, very highly paid district manager and like a part-timer or, so you have out in the outer boroughs, district managers,
Mhm.
staffers. It is usually the district managers because they sort of take it for themselves,
Mhm.
paid
That's-
20-30% more than what you would get in Manhattan, because in Manhattan, everything is so busy,
Right.
we need full staff.
And have you
And you
been,
have higher transportation costs because you're probably living further out too, like just,
Right.
yeah.
have you been compensated for all the technology upgrades? Has that been included in your budgets? Like all this stuff,
We
the Zoom,
do.
this,
The Zoom, the borough president has been paying for. These, we bought one, these computers, we buy them with our budget. One of the owls, the borough president gave us, but no, for machines and stuff, we buy those with our own, with the agency's money.
You have a
And
comment?
Brenda
So,
had it.
yeah, I have a comment on, we were talking about the higher living and the higher costs of Manhattan. We could be a little more specific with budget requests also, because if you follow the federal model, which Jim raised, you have locality pay. So on top of the standard salaries that everyone has, certain localities get a percentage more because of the cost of living. I have not heard that the city has done that with its
We don't.
boroughs.
We don't have that, no. Alas. But it sounds like this one needs updating.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
work.
And we need to update some of the language, so, not referring to fiscal year 2019,
Yeah.
we can just update.
and the roles too. I mean, you're a community board manager,
District manager.
district manager. Your counterpart in Richmond County should be getting the same level of pay. And then, maybe we can have a cost of living adjustment for the differences between the boroughs. But he shouldn't be using have a big personnel pot to hire, as you said, a part-timer and pay himself more. That's abusive
Yeah, I agree.
of the taxpayers.
I have a question on this write-up. So the reason why this is set to 2019-20 is because, remember, in 2019, we got some extra money for community board, right? And then they maintained it in 2020.
Yes.
Right, but then they didn't afterward,
Right.
right, in 21, because again, 21 was almost like an austerity budget given the pandemic. So this is why we've gone back, keeping 2019 as a baseline is important, because it was a year where the city had a good surplus of money and they were able to give a boost,
That's true.
yeah.
This was that year, if you guys remember, there was this community board that bought a car, that's
Yeah.
this.
I don't remember a community board in a car, but I do remember the city having a
I
good budget.
vaguely remember that, yeah.
Brooklyn CB1.
Yeah.
Wow,
And
where are they, they're far out, that's what they.
Brooklyn CB.
They're Williamsburg.
Williams.
Oh, that's,
Williamsburg.
okay, that's not that, isn't that not Bay Ridge, where you could drive somewhere?
Yeah,
Across the road.
that's not the absurdity. Williamsburg has good transit.
Yeah, they have good transit, like, it's not, I was thinking, way out.
Brendan, you had another comment about this?
Yeah, the other thing I would say, like, in addition to staff retention, is also like staff expansion, just because. I don't think it's just the case with our community board. A lot of times, community boards, at least a lot of the Manhattan ones, it seems like, are maybe stretched a little bit thin in terms of like how much are on our plates, and like when that's the case, it's hard to like keep up with the times and have the sort of technology, have the sort of services that our taxpayers deserve.
And we purposely don't enlarge the staff because I'm, in talking with leadership, I persuaded them that it was best to keep the staff as small as it could possibly be and pay them as much as we can, as opposed to spreading a finite amount even thinner.
Mhm. Yeah, that shouldn't be.
Great, so I think we have our,
Yeah, so I would say cost of living adjustment, I would also ask, like geographic, adjustment, but I would say a COLA increases should happen too. For,
I'm not, I'm not sure that would be persuasive this year
Yeah.
because the union staff just got a raise. The district managers are about to, so they're.
so you're
you
accounting
just
for
got
that
some-
kind of
You just
increase,
got something. and
yeah,
so-
the increased cost of living overall because of inflation.
But if our budget were to be increased, then we could do what's called merit increases.
Yeah.
And then those are at the discretion of the chair,
Mhm.
so.
And the 42.5 was other than personal services,
Yes,
so,
it specifically could not be used for
Right.
personnel.
so it's not really as if they've been terribly generous with you guys.
Right, so I think that was the last of our budget
That's
requests,
correct.
right?
We can take a stab at updating this. It's very much personnel.
Yeah, so then, yeah.
That would be great.
Anything else?
Well, we'll move on to, so the next agenda item is, chair's report, which we don't have. We'll waive that today. And then the last item is old or new business. Anyone would like to raise any new business? I do have one thing, I will make it quick, but I wanted to bring up, I did want to bring a new business item to the attention of the committee. That we can discuss in depth, at a future meeting. But, I wanted to put on everyone's radar, the property tax, New York City property tax reform issue. So for those of you who are not aware, the way that New York City assesses and values its property and the taxes is not related to the market value of properties. So over time, what this has led to is that disproportionately outer boroughs, minority neighborhoods are paying like the owners are paying disproportionate share of taxes relative to other parts of the city. And so this has been, numerous reports have been written about this, numerous articles have been written about this over the years. Under the de Blasio administration, they formed a commission that issued a report with recommendations on how to make a property tax system for the city that is more equitable. However, none of those recommendations were implemented. Out of frustration, there was a coalition that was formed of an advocacy group on behalf of other organizations called Tax Equity Now, New York. They filed a lawsuit against the city and the state for the property tax situation being the way it is. Last year, the New York appellate division dismissed the case. However, just a few weeks ago, the appeals court, the highest court in the state, reversed the decision of the lower court and sent it back and said, no, this has legitimacy. You have to decide on this. So given the timing of that, I think now may be the time for the committee and for the board to add our voice to what this reform process is going to look like based on a lot of the reports that have already been put out. And so I would suggest that maybe next time we can do a deeper dive. I'm happy to prepare I've kind of tracked this issue. I'm happy to prepare some documents that we can circulate and also maybe some skeleton language in a resolution that we can work through during the next meeting, but
Do you have the case citation?
What do you mean?
The
citation?
case that was up at
Yes.
the Court of Appeals?
Yeah.
What's the name of the case?
Tax Equity Now, New York.
Tax Equity Now
versus the
versus,
state of New York and the city of New York. So the state portion was dismissed also. They said, no, you can't sue the state, but the city portion was left.
Right.
And there were certain pieces of it that were also said, yeah.
is it a lengthy
dismissed.
decision?
I mean, I don't know, lengthy relative to what, I mean, I read the whole decision, but yeah.
20 pages
Yeah, yeah.
versus 80.
You can read it.
160.
But, and there's a lot of other summary reports that help understand this issue for those who may not have followed it, but I think it's very germane to the whole issue of housing equity, taxation, who bears the burden. If we're talking about creating affordable housing, well, guess what? Once you have that home that you supposedly can afford, you're paying a lot in property taxes that perhaps is not equitable relative to the value of your home. So it's just something that I think we should look.
No, I think we should
look
definitely
into.
discuss it, and I mean, I think it's great if you can present on it. Oftentimes when we have issues, we get the people from the organization,
so I
we
was
can
gonna
ask them
say
if they wanna
maybe-
come speak.
Maybe we could invite somebody from tax equity, now somebody from the comptroller's office.
Yeah,
Because he also issued recommendations specifically about this.
Yeah.
And so we can perhaps have
Yeah.
a bigger discussion
and
about it.
control's office is something Jim has had an issue with the pension side.
I'm trying to
which
get the
we
controller here
reached
for
out
3
many times.
years.
Yeah, we reached out.
To ask about his pensions
Yeah.
and.
And this is
can't get-
different, I think on this issue, we'll have more response
come.
than the actuary.
This
but-
is something he'll want to
Yeah, yeah, we'll
pursue.
talk about it, I think it'll be
But-
different, but yeah.
Talking about why he's still counting a 7% compounded annual growth rate versus the state's 5.9% compounded annual growth rate, he won't answer that question. Go
It
figure.
might be worth, seeing if the residents of this district have things to say about this. Maybe they have anecdotes about whether paying their property taxes is a hardship or not. If in fact, the ultimate goal is to write a resolution, while, we can send a report to the committee, the 2021 report, or we can send a copy of the case decision or something to the committee. Well, certainly there's an intellectual and academic case to be made for why this is a worthwhile topic. If we could infuse into the resolution sort of voices of the community, it might be, it might make it that much more
Yeah.
persuasive.
How do we do that?
Well, it depends on, I personally think this should probably be a discussion that happens over several committees,
Yeah.
meetings. Maybe, your presentation, since you seem very well versed in this issue, should happen at one of them. Maybe we can, invite the public to that. Maybe we can have that just be a committee discussion. And then we can, advertise the video of it to our newsletter. And we could, at the next meeting, do like a public hearing where people come and to say, this is what I think about property taxes or something like that. The city does want community boards to be having more public hearings than we normally do. And then if there are any very compelling testimony from those could be put in the resolution, or just, if generally everyone that comes and says, hey, this is an issue for us, then just generically we can say, this is an issue for our community. And it's a way to really tie it back to Community District 6, as opposed to just have it be a academic
generic
exercise.
B has her hand raised.
So I think if you're talking about the classification for property taxes, which I think is at the basis of this, our district really is more favorable on the rate for co-ops and condos than a
Right.
single individual home. So if you were going to go to the opinion of people in our district, because there aren't single homes, they may not have the same reaction as citywide you do. So this is, I know this issue because I was president of my co-op board for years, and we used to deal with the issue and get the rebates on the taxes. It's very difficult for our community board, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't have a discussion and frame the issue.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
We end up paying it through, as she said, through the maintenance, co-ops and condos. Landlords end up paying it through their own, from the rent proceeds. And again, bear in mind what I've been saying now since congestion pricing came along. This is gonna be a lot of the middle income housing in this community district is gonna be made unaffordable. Because all of the revenue from the parking garages is going to either diminish greatly, and those garages are gonna renegotiate their leases, or they're gonna walk away. And my building, we get $500,000 a year from our parking garage. It's gonna be a lot. That's gonna be a big fiscal hit for this congestion pricing.
Well, one of the bigger issues for renters, especially so rental buildings, are skewed to paying more tax than co-ops and condos. So that's also one of the reasons why rent is so high in our district. It's because rental buildings are taxed at a much higher level, and they pass on those property taxes to their tenants. So
Sure.
that's
We pay,
it's not just homeowners, but renters also have a big.
but we end up paying it as,
Yeah.
your maintenance is basically rent,
I would add to that, it's not related to this, but I do think that the reform would actually benefit people who are not in this district more, but it doesn't mean we don't have that discussion. But in terms of taking community input, but something that I've heard from people in the district is, you know, the cost of doing like the local law 11 repairs and other repairs, because there's been more building code since 2019, means that every building right now is doing some kind of improvement, which everybody has assessments on. And there are people, especially seniors, like say you are in a set income, you paid off your mortgage and now you've just been staying in this building, it's become an issue for
Right.
buildings. And nobody right now, you know, like even in the worst situations, New York City only had one co-op in the 70s that went bankrupt, but you could have a situation where several, especially because we have an aging population, there's gonna be many more seniors in these homes with these increased costs. It's something I think that's worth looking at. I'm not, again, I've just heard this from people. I can't give you more information.
It's not just local law 11 though. It's also the environmental thing where you're going to have to pay, I forget the law number, where you have to pay to reduce your carbon emissions.
Local law
It's-
97.
Yeah, well, it's that, yeah. You also have the requirement to have your garages, if you have a underground parking garage. We're talking hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. Plus you have to maintain your sidewalks and all the other general expenses.
Yeah.
It's very, very.
And all of that is done for our safety, for the environment, but the cost of it, and partially the cost, again, having served on my board too, is that there's only so few companies now past pandemic, like for local law 11, who are willing to do this work, construction companies, and sometimes they just don't show up.
Mhm.
It delays, you know, the work, and you just can't do anything about it, but it
Yeah.
adds to your cost because you're paying a fee at DOB if you get delayed.
Yeah, and you keep your scaffolding up for too
Yeah,
long.
yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
And now there's a scaffolding, you know, push to get rid of it. that's
Now
all
that has to
efficient.
come down.
Yeah,
The New York Times a week ago did an article on the property tax issue that you raised. We can send it around to the committee if you'd like.
Yeah, it looks.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll put together a little set of links, but for people to educate, and we can send that around for next time. Great,
And we all
I think so.
Yeah.
Motion, do I have a motion? to
yeah, motion
adjourn?
to adjourn.
adjourn.
Great, we're adjourned.